Thanks, Elizabeth. This morning, after launching airstrikes in Syria, President Obama announced at the United Nations that the greatest threat against the world wasn't terror, it's climate change.
There's one issue that will define the contours of the century more dramatically than any other, and that is the urgent and growing threat of a changing climate. The climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it.
But hasn't the climate always changed? And how do we answer that call? And would it really make a difference if we changed everything? Joining us right now for a fair and balanced debate is Bob Deans, the Director of Federal Communications for the Natural Resources Defense Council, and Myron Ebell, the Director of the Center for Energy and Environment at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Both of them have really long business cards with gigantic titles. It's going to be a good debate, though. All right, Bob, let's start with you. When the President of the United States says that climate change is settled science, is he right?
Well, I think what we've settled is that the carbon pollution that's coming from burning fossil fuels is indeed warming the planet. There is no question about that. I mean, we just finished the hottest summer on record globally. The 15 hottest years on record globally, Steve, have all come since 1997. And we know that this is being caused by the carbon pollution that's coming from burning fossil fuels. So that's the piece that's been settled. Now, do we have more questions about how this pollution is affecting us? Sure. Will we ask them? You bet. That's how science works. But we know enough right now that we need to take measures to protect future generations from this widening scourge. That's important.
All right, Myron, let me ask you exactly the same question. When the President of the United States says that climate change is settled science, is he right?
It's not settled in the way he thinks it is. We have had a long period now in which the computer modelers have dominated the debate. They have predicted a lot of warming, and we are in a fairly warm period right now, but for the last 17 or 18 years, there has been no warming. There's been no increase in the global mean temperature. So this whole debate has really been answered. Global warming is not a crisis.
Okay, Bob, earlier you were talking about how much stuff we pump into the atmosphere. Over the weekend, there was an item in the Wall Street Journal called, the item was called Climate Science is Not Settled, by a leading scientist by the name of Stephen Kuhn. And what he said was the big question, it's clear that the climate has always changed and always will change. The big question is how much of an impact do humans have on this gigantic thing known as our climate? And the expected shift by the atmosphere in natural greenhouse gases and stuff like that by humans would only impact 1 or 2%. The other 98 or 99%, Bob, would be from Mother Nature.
Well, here's what we know, Steve. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution a couple of centuries ago, we have increased the carbon dioxide level in the global atmosphere by 43%. That's a huge number. And here's who tells us it's a problem. The National Academy of Sciences, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the guys who put a man on the moon, the Pentagon, the Commerce Department, the State Department, the most foundational scientists all over the world are telling us this is a serious problem. We've got to do something about it. And you know, Steve, a couple of summers ago, 2012, we had the hottest year on record here in the United States. I went out and talked to corn farmers in Kansas. Their cornfields were baking. I talked to cattle ranchers in Colorado, all the way to the Ohio River Valley. They're having to sell off their herds because their pastures are burning up. People, wildfires. We had 130 Americans killed, $65 billion worth of damage by Hurricane Sandy, 14 feet of water in downtown Manhattan. These things haven't happened before. This is what we're seeing before our very eyes.
All right, Myron, you get the final word on this. You know, the climate has always changed, always will change. The big question, though, is how much of that is can you pin on man, and how much is Mother Nature?
The science is in. Carbon dioxide levels have gone up by 43%, from 270 parts per million to 400 parts per million. That's 1 part per 2,500 in the atmosphere. The fact is that the warming has not met the model projections, the scary predictions, and the impacts that President Obama and all of these national academies talk about simply aren't there. We do not have more heat waves. We are not having more big storms. We haven't had any hurricanes this year, for example. So I think that this is a kind of fantasy world that they're living in.
Well, I tell you what, great debate. We thank you both, Bob and Myron, for joining us live to talk about climate change. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right.